So glad to have you all tonight. So glad you can all make it. Students, colleagues, friends, and staff, I would like you to prepare for the most exciting evening of your life ever. Okay, but it's going to be nice. I'd like to start with just opening up and say thank you, and I want to read a few things. This is just so we keep the light gas on and let you guys know about Swig a little bit, and then we'll introduce our dynamic speaker. I think that we're really in for a treat tonight. Can we give our speaker, Marc Dollinger, a round of applause? And for all of you students who I know are working very hard and diligently towards your educational goals, you made it here tonight. Give yourself a round of applause. I'm going to be reading a few things just for information, so bear with me. I'll try to make this as painless as possible. Welcome everyone to the first event of the Swig Program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice for the 2018-19 academic year. Well, tonight we will learn with our guest, Mr. Marc Dollinger. My name is Reggie Daniels, and it is my honor and privilege to work with this cutting-edge program. Let me begin by thanking a number of people for their support in making this event possible. Thank the JSSJ staff, Professor Aaron Topper, my mentor. Now, I may mess this up, Oren Crow Zeldin, as well as Ali Cunningham. Thank you to my co-educator and collaborator, Shaina Hammerman. She always dreamed of and envisioning what this class would be. Thank you to all the JSSJ faculty, and thank you to the Department of Theology and Religious Studies for co-sponsoring our event. I'd like to take a brief moment to tell you about our Swig program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. There are also green booklets found at the entrance of the room, which describe our work in great detail. Please take note on your way out. You will also sign up to be put on our listserv, a sheet that can be found next to the green booklets. So in 1977, Melvin M. Swig and several friends saw the need to establish a Jewish Studies program in the San Francisco Bay Area. For them, the University of San Francisco, a premier Jesuit college institution of higher learning, was the natural home. Not only was this the first endowed chair or Jewish Studies program at any college or university in the Bay Area, but Swig and USF had actually broken ground on a global scale. That means it's big, y'all. It was the first Jewish Studies chair or program at a Catholic university anywhere in the world. Let's give that a round of applause. In 2008, the program was relaunched at the Swig Program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. Once again, USF and the program broke historical ground, this time becoming the first academic program worldwide to formally link Jewish studies and social justice. How about another round of applause? Right. Including a minor in this field, the classroom, the program offers a wide range of significant Jewish study courses not found in other educational settings. That's no put down, Mark, too, San Francisco State. As well as an annual intensive Hebrew language summer program called Hebrew San Francisco Upland. 2018 was our 21st consecutive summer. We have a minor in JSSJ, offering an array of courses not offered in other schools, such as social justice, activism and Jews, forgiving the unforgivable, and the ethic of apologies, Jews, Judaism, and Jewish identities, refugees, and justice. Funny Jews. Yeah, that's it. Queering religion, Black and Jewish relations, and more. Over the past 40 years, literally tens of thousands of students have taken our Jewish studies courses. Hundreds are enrolled each year. 2017 to 18 alone has more than 1,000 students in our Jewish study classes. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? All right. Beyond the classroom, the JSSJ program offers extraordinary events that are free and open to the public. And that's the best price, right? Free. Which thousands have attended. We focus events around the topics of Israel and Palestine, the Holocaust and genocide, tough stuff. Studies and have 4 annual events. Each fall, we have a speaker series focused on Jewish identities, highlighting the rich diversity of Jews in terms of ethnicity, gender, national sensibilities, sex, sexual orientation, race, and a number of other identities. Tonight's event is part of this series. Each fall, we also offer an annual human rights lecture, first launched in 2015 through 16 academic year, when we brought to campus Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, the head of the United Nations military in Rwanda, who refused orders to evacuate the East African nation when genocide began. Each spring we have an annual social justice lecture and an annual social justice Passover Seder, dealing with the events such as poverty in Haiti, genocide in Chad, the Sudan and the Congo, gender justice. These are all pretty tough topics that we're wrestling with. So I want to give you all a round of applause and support for coming and participating. If you're concerned about these issues, please note that we have 2 other exciting events coming up this fall. In 2018, on Wednesday, September 26th, on Wednesday, September 26th, 6:30, in the Fromm Hall, Marsachi room, right around the corner, we have an event titled Chinese and Jewish. In this talk, Rabbi Jacqueline Bates Munchen, senior rabbi at Oakland's Temple Sinai, right? Sinai. Native San Francisco, and the first Chinese American rabbi in history. I'm learning my pronunciation of Jewish words. This is my first year with the faculty here, so I'm very excited to learn all this information. We'll share some of her insights on Jewish identities. Then on Thursday, October 25th, also at 6:30 p.m. in Fromm Hall, the Marsachi Room, we have our 4th annual JSSJ Human Rights Lecture, an event entitled Intersex and Human Rights. Intersex people are born with sex characteristics that don't fit typical definitions of male and female. In many countries, intersex children are subjected to repeated surgery and treatment to try to change their sex characteristics and appearance, causing terrible physical, psychological, and emotional pain, and violating their rights. Founder of the Transgender Clinic of San Francisco, Doctor of Family Medicine and Human Rights Watch researcher, Dr. Suji Tamir Mattis, will speak about the failure of the law to protect intersex children from unethical medical surgeries in the U.S. There are many ways to change the world for the better. Did you guys know that? Yeah, we're here to change the world from here. A multitude of pieces of the puzzle regarding what each of us can do to help move and even transform the world into its potential, called Tikkun Olam, in the Jewish tradition. Through the Swig JSSJ program, We believe that education is the best long-term way to create systemic change. Anybody here believe that? Yeah. Education is the way. Whether one has the time to take a semester-long course or a mere few hours to hear a single speaker, education is fundamental to making our world better. Paramount in shining the spotlight on the margins, on oppressed communities who are mistreated merely because of their race, ethnicity, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or another social identity altogether. Education. All right, now we get to the good part. The reason why we are all here. Okay, we have a guest tonight that we had the wonderful opportunity to spend a little bit of time with. I would like to say from my own experience, and I can say this honestly without any fear of contradiction, and no, I didn't get paid to say this. I would like to say that he's an excellent storyteller, that his life is rich with experience, and that he is immersed in the information and the study and the research that he is about to put forth today. In fact, he has spent his entire life working around education and around these issues, and a lot of that life experience and research has went into this piece that we will be experiencing tonight in his presentation. So Dr. Marc Dollinger holds the Richard and Rhoda Goldman Endowed Chair in Jewish Studies and Social Responsibility at San Francisco State University. The author of 4 scholarly books in American Jewish history. His next project traces his own experience fighting campus anti-Semitism. He's fascinated by the topic since Jews are both privileged and persecuted while they face rebuke from the political right and left. Now that's a tough place to be, right? Man, you get it on both sides, right? Okay. So, Dr. Dollinger is a past president of both the Jewish Community High School of the Bay Area and Brandeis Hillel Day School. He serves as academic vice president of, I'm probably butchering some of these words, I'm sorry about that, Laris Judica, as well as trustee of URJ Camp Newman. He sits on the California Advisory Committee to the United States Commission on Civil Rights, was named 2008 Volunteer of the Year by the San Francisco Jewish Community Federation, and was awarded the San Francisco JCRC's 2015 Courageous Leader Award. Just for fun, Professor Dollinger helped actress Helen Hunt learn about her Jewish roots on NBC program, Who Do You Think You Are? Tonight, Dr. Dollinger will speak about his most recent book, Black Power, Jewish Politics, Reinventing the Alliance in the 1960s, which came out a few short months ago. Immediately after Dr. Dollinger shares some of his thoughts with us, Dr. Shaina Hammerman and I, that's me, SJ faculty and co-educators of the newest JSSJ course, Black and Jewish Relations. Can we get a little support on our new course? We'll have the pleasure to sit down with Dr. Dollinger and have a conversation about Black and Jewish relations. After this point, we will have a question and answer period with all of you. To those students who are required to be here, please do not slip out. We are watching. During the brief break between the periods, stay for the whole thing. For those of you who are in Professor Shamerman's class or in our class that we share, Black and Jewish Relations, you will get your sign-in sheet later. So we kind of try to take care of that. So without any further ado, I present to others, and I introduce to many, Dr. Dollinger.
It was 1972, 5 years before the Swig Program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice was formed at the University of San Francisco. And I lived in the almost all white suburbs of Los Angeles. Yeah. Palos Verdes, for those of you who know the South Bay of LA. All right, and just to locate you all, the Los Angeles Lakers had just won their first national championship. I got 4 people applauding for that. Still Chamberlain scores 100 points in one game, and they played their games at Inglewood's fabulous Forum, which is, you know, now
Inglewood.
But
In Inglewood.
they weren't the only basketball team that played there, because, well, when I was in 3rd grade, my mommy took my big brother and I, okay, here's the moment. That's not a 3rd grade picture, but I saw it, I said, oh, I'm putting that one out. We're in Manhattan. See, Mom brought Jeff and I to see the Harlem Globetrotters. It was fantastic. The skills and antics of Meadowlark Lemon, Fred Curly Neal offered me, it turned out, an early course direction for life. You see, I loved it so much that when the game ended, I turned to my mom with a 3rd grader's proclamation. When I grow up, I'm gonna be a Harlem Globetrotter. Crushing my spirit. Mom replied, oh dear, you're not. Why not, Mom? Because you have to be black to be a Harlem Globetrotter. And at that moment in 3rd grade, I knew that I was white, the Globetrotters were black, and it meant something. Well, apparently, I was a slow learner, because growing up in the 1970s in white suburban Los Angeles, I went to the Temple Beth Ellen Center in San Pedro, Reform Movement Synagogue, where I learned in all of my education 3 basic things. Number 1, the Holocaust was terrible. Number 2, Israel was wonderful. And number 3, the Jews were supposed to fight for social justice. This is the iconic image of Dr. King with Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel on their marches. So, loaded with all that I was and knew, at age 18, I arrived on the campus of UC Berkeley in the fall of 1980, and I was ready to change the world. This was where Mario Savio changed the world with the free speech movement, and there is, for anyone who's visited Berkeley campus, especially on a school day, a famed walkway on Sproul Plaza. This is where student groups will take a table, they'll put out whatever group they have there, and they'll have leaflets, and they'll basically try to attract students to their club. So, of course, and I know we have some Hillel reps here, so I'll put out here for Hillel. I went to the Berkeley Hillel table, and I got all my Jewish stuff. And there was only one stop next for me. That was the Black Student Union table. And I walked up to the table and introduced myself to my African-American classmate who was there and proclaimed to him, let's start a Black-Jewish dialogue. Thank you, Professor. Because the next line I have written right here and seared into my 18-year-old memory, he burst out laughing. And kept laughing. Until I have to believe he saw the shock, horror, and embarrassment on my face. And with compassion, did all he could to control himself. And to ease a really awkward moment, he smiled and let me know the following. He said, hey, I'm from Harlem. Assuming I would know what that meant. On one level, I knew what that meant because I knew Harlem was and is an African-American neighborhood in Manhattan. But on another level, I understood when he said that to me, he was actually communicating a whole lot more. This African Student Union's reference to this Manhattan neighborhood communicated 2 different generations of the Black-Jewish divide. That which followed passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the tragic death of Dr. King. Blacks from New York, I understood quickly, did not see social justice in the social justice world through the same lens as white Jewish liberals from suburban LA. In a gesture of kindness, my Harlem interlocutor offered to pitch my request for a Black-Jewish dialogue to his club members, even as he wanted to be honest enough to let me know that he didn't think anyone would be interested. Thanks for the offer, I answered, but there's no need. And that ended the UC Berkeley Black-Jewish Alliance. And began work on this book, where I'm here to talk to you tonight. Good evening. It is great to be here. It's great to be at USF with the Swig Program. Wow. Not to engage in stereotyping too soon, but I'm on a book tour, and I can put all my official Jewish communal audiences together times 10, and they don't match what USF is delivering tonight, so thank you. I appreciate that. My friends and colleagues on your faculty, and a special heartfelt thank you. Rabbi Levi Sell is here, and in my undergraduate days, he mentored me on my career path, and I sat with him one day and said to him, what should I be when I grow up? And he looked at me and said, you should be a Jewish studies professor, and here I am, thanks to you. All right, this book is about three things: history, historiography, and historical memory. And interestingly, I think the history part is the least. So, in the interest of time, I'm not going to ask you to answer the questions. I'm just going to give you the answers, so we'll plow through and we can start our chat. We'll begin with the definition of history, which is the study of the past. That's the easy question. My students don't get a prize for getting that. And Edith here, one of my students from SF State, she said to me when I walked in, she said, you're having a long day. I said, you too, because we were in class this morning. So it's good to see you. History is a study of the past. Historiography is what I want to talk to you about. If you look at the word, and the English majors here, the word is graph at the end, which means writing. Historiography is the writing of history. The history of the history of history. Simply put, every 20 years, historians write about the same moment in very different ways, because each of us put our own lens to that particular subject. And when you get to grad school in history, you don't read history, you read historiography. What you read is, whatever the topic is, Civil War. Every historian ever wrote about it over the years, and then you actually have to write your paper on how they approached it in different ways. For example, you're a white student at the University of Mississippi in 1840. The class is on slavery. You get your textbook from the University of Mississippi Press. What's it going to say about slavery? That it was a positive good. All right, now you're a white student at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, 1860. Same class on slavery. That textbook from Boston, what does it say? Slavery is horrible because that's the center of abolitionism. If you have a student who doesn't know anything from anything, you put both chapters side by side, they'll have no clue it's the same historical event. So the job of the academic historian is to contest every generation before you call them idiots. Having humility to know that in 20 years, a new generation of graduate students will read your book and call you stupid as well. So you have to have both ego and compassion. So. Oh yes, from the late Rabbi Michael Signer, why use a monosyllabic when a polysyllabic will do? I just like to internalize that in my everyday conversations with people. So, the study of how historians can study the past. Here is my favorite polysyllabic word in the English language. There it is, filiopietistic. Anyone? I'll give you a hint, it's from the Greek. Still no takers. Literally, love of one's own family. It actually means ethnic self-congratulations, which in Jewish studies means, aren't the Jews great? Because it turns out the first generation of historical writing in Jewish studies are all lauding and complimenting Jews. By the way, in African American studies, it's the same. All the ethnic studies, the first historiographic generation tends to be filiopietistic. Impress your friends, and the next week use the phrase filiopietistic historiographic analysis in regular conversation. Send me an email or Professor Hunt Tapper, I'll give you a prize. You can't say I went to a lecture and heard about filiopietistic historiographic analysis. You have to have a conversation for which the phrase naturally occurs, and then you'll win the prize. See, the first generation says, aren't the Jews great? So the second generation, to get published, have to say, oh, the Jews are terrible. And then the third generation has to say to the first two, stop fighting, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And then the fourth generation says, oh, you're all off, it's about environmentalism anyway. Historical memory. It's different than history, because it's not the study of the past, it's not historiography, the study of how historians study the past. Historical memory is what we all remember about the past, or shall I say what we forget, or what we choose to remember, or how we choose to remember it. And this is the most interesting thing. You see, in academic history, historians are supposed to write about a time and place different from their own. We're not supposed to write ourselves into our history. I came into a personal and professional conflict around this book, because it's called Black Power, Jewish Politics, and I'm a white man writing it. And as I learned in my research from my colleagues of color, they would say, my blackness is on every word I wrote, because it can't otherwise be. And guess what, Professor Dollinger, your whiteness is on every word too, except you don't have to say so because you enjoy the privilege of not having to say so. So I violated the rules of history with this book by telling that Harlem Globetrotter story and the story of that student at Berkeley in a preface, so that every reader of the book, before they get to the historical argument, can know the perspective and the background of the historian writing it, and then can come to whatever assessment they want to make of the content based upon what they know about the person. Historiography. This is the letter Y. It represents my contribution from the advanced art class I took in 4th grade. Because that's about as sophisticated as I was able to achieve in art. I knew I was destined for academics. And I looked at that and said, actually, that is a visual depiction of the historiographic argumentation surrounding Black-Jewish relations in post-war America. What do you think? To illustrate, imagine, on this side we have African Americans, and on this side we have Jews. And you'll notice they are apart. But fortunately, as time goes on, they come together. Right there. Isn't that beautiful? Let's just say it's 1954-ish. That's Brown decision, Montgomery bus boycott, beginning of Dr. King's participation in the movement. And according to the Y historiographic theory, which I dare tell you is quite filiopietistic, blacks and Jews marched together into history. It's nice. It's wrong, but it's nice. And what I like to contend is you don't have to read any of the first generation of the historiography on Black-Jewish relations, because that's what it says. It doesn't matter where, when, topic, subject, biography, community study, or whatever. And which means, of course, you go to graduate school, you need to challenge the why. So how are we going to challenge it? Oh, yes. The letter X. For those of you good with foreshadowing, you might have a basic understanding of where we're headed here. You see, here we have African Americans over here, we have Jews over here. The time goes by, they meet, they met, let's say 1954. But now, let's go to maybe 64 with passage of the Civil Rights Act, or 65 with the Voting Rights Act, or the rise of Black Power, somewhere in the middle of this. And the communities split. And now, today, for the most part, the Black-Jewish Alliance is not certainly what it was in the early post-war years. And this is where the historiography stood, for another generation, until, okay, now. So, my job here was to try to come up, we've done the X, we've done the Y, so now I've got to figure out the Z. And that's where we'll go now. So, okay. I'm going to give you a quote, but it's a trick, because I don't say who said the quote or when they said it. And we have to guess who said it or when. You don't have to guess the name of the person. You could just guess the kind of person who said it. Perhaps the saddest element in this whole frightening picture is in the fact that Jews are the people who are best able to understand the rhetoric of black power, even though they're most directly on the firing line of its attack. You see, when black power rose in the mid-60s, it was anti-Semitic, it was anti-Zionist, it was charged with having split the relationship between blacks and Jews. And there was not a lot of love in the American Jewish community for black power activists. So with that understanding, who would say that the saddest element in this frightening picture is that Jews should be able to understand black power even as they're on the firing line of the attack? Anyone? What kind of person would say this? What's that? Oh, filiopietistic, historiographic person? Yeah. So, Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg, congregational rabbi whose father actually got fired for supporting Dr. King in the civil rights movement. I have to say, as a historian sitting in the archives, finding out that a leading American rabbi was arguing in the midst of the breakup between blacks and Jews, understanding that Jews were facing anti-Semitism, but still saying in this frightening picture, Jews should actually be able to understand black power. And I said, okay, that quote's getting in the book. The positive aspect of black power is its search for ethnic identity. This, we Jews of all people should be able to understand and approve. The American black today is in this respect retracing precisely the experience of American Jews a generation or two ago. Whatever Rabbi Hertzberg said, this person's pushing it even further, making the argument that Jews should listen up to what black nationalists are doing and saying, and that this in fact can offer something to Jewish identity. And the fun part here is this is Rabbi Roland Gittleson. Now Rabbi Roland Gittleson is important, and I found like a very old picture of the white man because I wanted to demonstrate that in 1948, President Harry Truman put him on the President's Commission for Civil Rights. So he was early on involved. In the 1950s, he sent his congregants from Temple Israel in Boston down to Mississippi to get arrested and thrown in jail at Parchment. And he was writing to the local rabbis in the South to basically get them to visit and support his congregants in jail. So one argument is you can't say that the Jews were supportive of black power because the Jews of the 60s were not the Jews of the 50s or the 40s. And Roland Gittleson, who was one of the leaders of all of it, went from the 40s, 50s, and even in the 60s. He's along with the times, and he gets it. So the conclusion historiographically, Jewish leaders supported the black power movement in the 1960s. And by the way, it's stunning because all of their support was public, and nowhere in the literature of the earlier generations did any historians write this. And I'm thinking, you know, it's not hard to find this material. Maybe there's other reasons you didn't want to write that. And now we have the intersection of historical memory with historiography. All right, the Anti-Defamation League is the nation's leading Jewish agency fighting anti-Semitism. So, what do you think the position of the ADL would be on the Nation of Islam? And I know Farrakhan's been in the news a lot recently, Malcolm X before that, Elijah Mohammed before that. It's supposed to be really bad, right? That's the answer that the X and Y historiographic field would tell you, and that's where historical memory is. And, well, here's the head of the ADL. Time magazine put out a cover story on Elijah Mohammed, the founder of the Nation of Islam, or at least in the 1950s, and it called him a racist, a bigot, and an anti-Semite. So he Forster sent out a confidential memo to all of his agency heads around the country. Time magazine notwithstanding, we have no documentable evidence of anti-Semitism on the part of the Temples of Islam movement or Elijah Mohammed. How on earth, or why on earth, would the leading Jewish defense agency come to the defense of the Nation of Islam? Now it's getting more interesting. I'll just add here. In 1959, members of the Nation of Islam in jail in Norton, Virginia, were prevented from wearing Muslim clothing in prayer. and they wrote to the warden to say it's a violation of their religious freedom. The American Jewish Committee wrote a letter to the warden demanding that the Nation of Islam members be allowed to wear their Muslim clothing as a statement of the right of religious expression. And I would just say that is something of the 50s. It is not something of the 60s, 70s, or the 21st. A newly militant, newly self-assertive black will no longer submit to the humiliation of the past. Earlier generations of African American activists failed, but a new generation is appearing in a situation for the first time with the odds are with them. Their newness, their militancy, their self-assertion are bound to pay off. When I first read this, I said this is an African American intellectual who is praising Black Power. Turns out to be a Jewish professor at MIT in 1962. Published in Commentary, which is a Jewish communal magazine. 2 years, 3 or 4 years before Black Power rises, a national Jewish magazine is already publishing that it's going to happen. The long-standing African-American distrust of white people born of oppression is manifesting itself in a growing spirit of go it alone. Blacks were reevaluating their alliances. They come to know their strength. This community leader predicted a period of mutual irritation, followed by new and more active forms of black anti-Semitism. That's calling out the black-Jewish split, and he did it in 1960. You see, Jewish leaders anticipated the rise of Black Power, and they understood the limits of white Jewish liberalism long before everything broke out in the 1960s. I am tired of the philanthropy of rich white men towards your race. I want to see you fight your own battles with your own leaders and your own money. We white men of whatever creed or faith cannot fight your battles for you. We will stand shoulder to shoulder with you until you can fight as generals all by yourselves. This is a very progressive Jewish leader in the mid or late 1960s who's getting an understanding of the inevitability of what just happened. No, it's actually Joel Spingarn from 1914. And Joel Spingarn was one of the 3 founders of the NAACP with W.B. Du Bois and Arthur Spingarn. So if you were going to say that there is going to be a Jewish leader who is like the #1 Jewish leader on race relations in the early 20th century, Joel Spingarn would be it. He is predicting the rise of Black Power 50 years before that. Thesis #1 of the book. They knew all the time. They weren't surprised, and they supported it. Turning inward. Well, it turns out American Jews borrowed from Black Power in order to strengthen their own communal movements. This is the Soviet Jewry movement, which became national in 1964. In the 1970s, 10,000 Jews were out marching for the rights of Soviet Jews. They argued against the communist regime of the Soviet Union. That's how you get support in the US Congress. But I argue if you wanted to get support of Congress on anti-communism, you start your movement in 54 with McCarthyism. You don't wait 10 years until the mid-60s. Well, in the 50s, American Jews were assimilating into the white suburbs and not interested in being public with their ethnic identities. By the mid-60s, when black activists were saying to every ethnic racial gender group, go fight, you know, and the Jews said, all right, we'll go fight too. Turns out 1/3 of the Soviet Jewry activists trained in the civil rights movement. And when Soviet Jewry activists talked about why they're doing what they're doing, they mentioned the Black Power movement. American Zionism peaked after the Six-Day War in 1967. All my dear beloved rabbi friends credit themselves for all the good work they did. Yay, for rabbis, and I argue, the 67 war was perfectly timed. Black Power in 64 and 65, lots of tension. Jews learning that they can't help blacks achieve autonomy, they should have Jewish autonomy. And then in 6 days, the state of Israel has a dramatic and thrilling military victory. And American Jews respond with $18 million in pledges at one lunch and 1 hour in New York City the week after. Giving doubled in 1 year. 7,500 Jewish college students called their moms, asked for their passports, and went to Israel to have the Israelis be able to go and fight. The University of California started an education abroad program at the University of Jerusalem. And a public opinion poll found 97% of American Jews showing strong sympathy for the Jewish state. I don't think we'd see that. And it worked in reverse. Rabbi Dov Peretz Elkins, in a sermon of the time, said black power is nothing more and nothing less than Negro Zionism. Our friend Rabbi Hertzberg called Stokely Carmichael, the leader of the Black Power movement, the most radical kind of Negro Zionist. Rabbi Roland Gittleson said the black power advocate is the Negro Zionist. Africa is his Israel. And American Jews became more traditional. I got the fiddler on the roof one for you. I know you're thinking on that. Jews became more religious than their parents. They wouldn't go home because they couldn't eat the food because it wasn't kosher enough for them. The #1 best-selling book of the Jewish Publication Society was the Bible. That's no surprise. The surprise was the second most popular book. It's called the Jewish Catalog. It's How to Be Jewish with macrame. It's a play on the whole of the catalog. Every chapter is how to knit your own challah for Friday night, how to knit your own kippah, you know. And young Jews were buying it like crazy because they were hippies, they were countercultural, and they wanted to know about Jewishness, and their parents didn't teach them. Because they were raised in the 50s, and they were told to assimilate. And I argue, thanks to Black Power, they were awakened to their Jewish identity. This book was so popular, they had the Jewish Catalog 2 and the Jewish Catalog 3. But they didn't have the Jewish Catalog 4, because by then all the kids that bought the 1 had their kids and sent them to day school and summer camp and religious school, and they didn't need a 4th version of the book because they learned it already. So I credit the rise of Jewish religiosity to Black Power. Here in San Francisco, Radical Jewish Union at Berkeley and the Radical students at Stanford, we're going to have a sit-in at the Jewish Community Federation, which is a philanthropic organization that's supposed to support the whole community. But they weren't supporting Jewish education enough. But they didn't do a sit-in. They did a pray-in. And they went on the evening of the Jewish Sabbath, and they prayed, and they wouldn't leave until they agreed to have greater funding for Jewish education. It's not just on the Jewish left that it happens, it's also on the Jewish right. The Jewish Defense League, termed by the FBI a domestic terrorist organization in later years, whose leader moved to Israel and was banned from election to the parliament because of his racist views, still emulated Black Power ideology by creating a Jewish militant organization based upon Black Panthers or Black Power in order to do for Jews what it perceived that these organizations were doing in the African American community. Well, that leads us, yes, to the letter Z. You see, the first generation of blacks and Jews got together, and it was really great. And it was really, and then it wasn't so great anymore in the mid-1960s. And the thing went backwards with the breakup. But in the late 60s and the 1970s, a new alliance of blacks and Jews together continued. But the togetherness was apart. Because at a time that American Jews thought they were becoming more Jewish, they weren't becoming more Jewish at all. Because they could only be more Jewish in America of the 1960s. They were actually being more secular, more American. But I argue they were actually just becoming more black. Thank you very much. Shall we chat?
Let's give another round of Okay.
All right, I'm going to ask the first question. Thank you for that. So you very clearly established the fact that Jewish Americans are taking inspiration from Black nationalist movements for Black power movements. And my question, although I know that your book is focused on the Jewish side of the story, I'm wondering if this inspiration could be read as appropriation, or whether or not this inspiration was detrimental to Black nationalism or toward the movement itself by somehow suppressing it or silencing it with white Jewish voices, or to Black Americans in general?
Thank you for getting right into it. I finished the book and then said to myself, oh my God, I wrote 250 pages of cultural appropriation, right? Because when I started writing this book a long time ago, that was not in the consciousness, or at least it wasn't in my mind. So the first thing I did is I started calling all of my colleagues in African American studies and said, did I just culturally appropriate, right? And so two things happened. One, I was assured that I wasn't because I was given, credit. And second, I added a section in the epilogue on cultural appropriation and how I was defining it and understanding it and how I saw that this fit into where it did. All that said, I really think that argument is about a deeper question and a theme, and that is the role and place of the white ally in interracial relationships and in the struggle for racial justice. Which is to say, this book is located in a historical moment, at least with Dr. King, prior to the rise of power, where an alliance with white liberals was seen as a positive development. The cynical line is, you bring in white liberals because the white media will only pay attention if white liberals are getting with Jew. The other side of it is, we are all human beings endowed by our Creator with godliness, and therefore every single person needs to ally themselves with every other person because we're all in it together, right? That's the more religious read on it. And it was seen as a really good thing to culturally appropriate, right? Like imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Perhaps as a consequence of the rise of militancy in the African American and many other communities as well, the white ally became a much more challenging role to play. The notion that the whole concept of white allies is actually detrimental to the movement for racial justice, because as Frederick Douglass said in 1856, power concedes nothing without a demand, it never did and it never will. And so long as white liberal allies are involved, there will never be a power transfer. That's a harder line position to take. And the book landed in the middle of all of that. So all I could do first was sort of locate the era of allyship as I was reading it in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, call out the challenge on cultural appropriation in the epilogue, and then let the readers sort of land it.
I think this story, and we've just been talking about this in my Funny Jews class, about white ethnic groups sort of modeling themselves after black power groups or black pride organizations. In the reading that we have in class, it tends to, they become, you write this, Jews become American by becoming more Jewish, something like that. But I don't know that the same story works for blacks, that they became more American by becoming more black. And I feel like that outcome, I don't know if that's, I haven't read it before yet. But I feel like that's sort of like the sequel to your book.
Well, and that's a reflection of the X and the Y historiographically, right? So the Y would deny what you just said.
Right.
Because it's going to contend that blacks and Jews have a commonality of marginalization and oppression, which would naturally bring them together. Mm-hmm. And then the next generation said, no, actually, Jews, like white Jews at least, are enjoying privilege. And there is a split. And one could tactically or strategically wish an alliance for about 10 years, because it would work, but no one's fooling themselves. And the historical memory part is, I wasn't reading any of this in the popular literature and certainly in the Jewish community settings I was in, and then I went into the archives. It was all over the place. In public, like published articles that showed that Jewish leaders were very understanding that it was an X and pressing the Y.
Yeah, I'm thinking, all right. Professor Dollinger, this is a really exciting time in history. And what I am concerned about, so I think of another exciting time, the Reconstruction era, and I think of the Civil Rights Movement as times where really big themes came to those moments. However, and we talked about this a little bit before, there were government agencies, for example, like COINTELPRO, which was a assigned assembly through the FBI, which started out to counteract or to provide counterintelligence to discombobulate communism in the United States. But after the threat of communism went down, it quickly shifted to black organizations, and one of its missions was to stop the rise of the Black Messiah, to counteract any type of black nationalist movement, and it was said to do so in the endeavor to prevent violence. However, it very quickly turned pretty corrupt and did some pretty unthinkable things that are just to this day being published, and was later on disbanded because of some of its un-American practices. And my question with that is, how might that have impacted the relations between black?
Thank you. Another excellent question. This is where I deploy the benefits of tenure. Share with you truth. If I was in a Jewish communal audience, I would have already told the rabbi which member of the board was going to call them after I finished saying this, and if they want me to just talk about Franklin Roosevelt instead. That's never a problem. I don't know your name, but you're wearing a Black Klansman shirt, right? So I want to start there, which is to say that if you've seen Spike Lee movie Black Klansman, it plays right into this theme. Some of the critique of Spike Lee over the movie is that the African-American police officer who was featured in this picture, not to give away spoilers, sorry, but he was actually involved in this, right? And Spike Lee did not put that in the movie. Been criticized for that. I have my own kind of version. In 1959, Elijah Mohammed, the charismatic leader of the Nation of Islam, was scheduled to give a public lecture in Newark, New Jersey, or what they call a large metropolis in northern New Jersey. I'm going with Newark. And the local American Jewish Committee, which is a Jewish self-defense agency, was concerned about his anti-Semitism. So they decided that they were going to go undercover in this hall to hear him speak, to figure out if he's a threat. Except that the American Jewish Committee had no black Jews to enter. So they went to the city of Newark and the city's Human Rights Committee that recruited an African American man to spy on Elijah Muhammad and report back to the city of Newark and to the American Jewish Committee, which I think was a fascinating linkage of a private advocacy group with a public entity around an attempt to surveil somebody they considered to be a military threat. He gave a 2.5-hour rambling speech, is how it was described. And in the rambling speech, he concluded that Jews killed Christ, which is the classic anti-Semitic trope of deism. The interesting part is the American Jewish Committee official report on that claimed that Elijah Muhammad was not anti-Semitic. He was merely anti-white, and therefore Jews should not be Muslim. Just to let you know, I gave this talk a week ago, and the local director of the American Jewish Committee was there, and I looked at him when I said that. He's not shocked that his own organization said that. And here would be the historiography. This was the 1950s. This is the time of black Jewish relations and king and everyone getting along. So if you're going to have an individual show up when everyone's supposed to get along, and he's going to stop people from getting along, the way you deal with him is to make him invisible so as not to ruin everyone getting along. 10 years later, everyone's fighting. So when Malcolm comes, as the next one, Elijah Muhammad, and he's saying same things, the Jewish organizations are going to scream and yell from the rooftops against it. And I would say that's not the story of the nation, that's the story of the changing.
Okay, I have one more sort of complicated one, and then maybe we can open it up. Okay, so your title is Professor of Jewish Studies and Social Responsibility. We are here with the program in Jewish Studies and Social Justice. This leads me to believe that this story that you're telling with the Z is that Jews are showing up for social justice as Jews, right? Becoming more American by becoming more Jewish, participating in activism as Jews. But The African American Studies program at USF is housed in the Critical Diversity Studies department, and Jewish Studies is in the Theology and Religious Studies department. And at SF State, it's a similar thing. Jewish Studies is part of the College of Liberal Arts, and African American Studies is part of that ethnic studies program. That story looks more like the X that you were describing, with this kind of divergent thing happening, where they're not developing in parallel, but sort of separately and in totally different terms. And I know this is not about the 1960s, but it feels like this is part of that story, your experience as a child, and the establishment of these programs in the late 60s, early 70s. It seems part of this trajectory, so I'm hoping you'll address it.
All right, so a joke answer first, then a real one.
Yes.
I'm an historian. It's tough enough to predict the past. Usually the first question I get is, are Jews becoming Republican? You know, like, yeah, right. Or to comment on the applicability of an historical work to the contemporary scene. This is a dangerous thing for me to do professionally, because I'm supposed to be good at predicting the past. And then as soon as we get into applications of today or pontificating on the future, it's my informed opinion, but it is an informed opinion, and I kind of break the rules. Unless I don't. Because I think the question is deeper than that. And that's why Jewish studies and Black studies tend to be in different colleges. It's about racial privilege and the purpose of education in the university. I think that's actually what privilege has to be. And we'll start with racial privilege. The X or the Z works either way. One could say that having Black studies and Jewish studies in the university in separate divisions is a consensus, but it's not the kind we had in the King years, but it is a consensus. What's the purpose of education in a university? Well, when I grew up, universities were third-person detached centers of critical inquiry, where all of you are here to learn how to think, how to read, how to write, and professors are not supposed to bring their politics into the classroom, and you're not supposed to be graded on whether you agree with my thesis. I even give my students a half-grade bonus, and Rita's here, for disagreeing with me, because I don't want to be the professor that says you have to agree with me, and they're wrong, and so they should harder task to try to do it. They should get half a grade. And maybe that's just all white privilege. And maybe I can afford to tell my students I'm neutral, because I'm a privileged white man with tenure, endowed chair at San Francisco State, because my colleagues in Black Studies and our College of Ethnic Studies, if you read their website, their mission is to overcome oppression for communities of color, and Jews are not. In fact, we want to jump right into Israel-Palestine Zionism, when you put Judaism and Zionism, and then you introduce that into all of these politics. Now it becomes highly problematic for a College of Ethnic Studies to warmly welcome Jewish studies if they understood the implications for the perception of white privilege and Zionism would mean for the mission of using education. And by the way, the goal of education is to change the world, and a professor doesn't give her or his political opinion. What's the point of going to college? Oh, I'm going to pretend with you all. I'm not going to tell you the answer. But you'll guess it by the time you're done, and then you go, or we could just be real and direct and get it out. And when scholars, typically scholars of color, do that, they tend to get in big trouble with the establishment, because you're not supposed to influence your students with your own character direction. So that's in fact what I think Jewish studies wrestles with, which is why I like it intellectually, because Jews sit in a position of privilege and marginality simultaneously and are struggling in that spot. And by looking through a lens of Jewish studies, we're able to animate.
Let's go to the floor. Questions? I'm well aware of your way of Jews who are not Ashkenazi, Jews who are not Western. So, as a historian who's speaking about this topic, I'm interested in how, and I'm sure this has come up or will come up quite a bit in that relationship, the challenge of talking about the Jews, or Jews, and African Americans without, and I know you know this, right? I'm not throwing a screwball at that.
I've got 3 already.
So how do you, if you're talking about Jews and African Americans, and that sounds as if there's no place for a Jewish African American. So how do you reconcile that, and how do you deal with that?
I'd rather deal with it than reconcile it. And the answer is what comes after the letter Z, right? That's the joke answer. It is a serious answer. The book is called Black Power, Jewish Politics. It starts with Black Power, but it's actually not a book about Black Power. When I have African Americans come to my book talks, I have received some harsh and legitimate critique. I came here expecting a talk on Black Power, and you only talked about the Jews, right? Because I'm trained in American Jewish history. And the book uses the lens of the Black Power movement as a reflection on what happened in American Jews in that era. And I happen to believe other ethnic racial groups follow Black Power as well. I just happen to be right there. The question is a deeper one, and that is, how does the existence of Jews of color complicate my thesis, the book, and the narrative? And for that, I don't know if Ilana made it. It's a lot of content here. I was having lunch with my friend Ilana Kaufman, who's Jew of color, African American, and I share this with you with her permission because she's the epilogue of the book. Because we were sitting at lunch, and whatever our agenda was doesn't matter because we just get into it. And when we had lunch a few years ago, we learned that the NAACP and Judaism's reform movement had joined together to recreate the March from Selma with Dr. King and Rabbi Heschel. And I was like, oh no. And Ilana was like, oh no. You know what, the XYZ, that's why all over it, right? 200 rabbis showed up, and Ilana and I looked at each other and we said, and you know what it's going to be on Facebook? Black NAACP. The Torah, white Jew. Because that's the image of black-Jewish relations, and it's so 1950s that it actually, this book we learned wasn't even 1950, then knew what was going on. So Rhoda and I sort of chatted this out, right? I called all my rabbi friends who went, and I said, are they going to come back thinking they're Rabbi Heschel and they're going to be like all proud and make sermons in their congregation about how great they are? Or are they going to come back saying, oh my God, I can't believe what I just learned. We're in big trouble and we got to work on it, right? I'd just like to say all my friends came out with number 2, not with the number 1 answer. And Ilana looked at me and said, what if you're black and Jewish? What does that Facebook picture look like? Literally and figuratively, how does that redefine the question? I was interested in the fundamental question, what's the difference between Jewishness and Americanness? And I concluded it's more American than Jewish, even though it was more Jewish. It was actually more American. Ilana wants to know, what's the difference between Jewishness and whiteness? And if one framed the black-Jewish relationship from the perspective of a Jew of color, it's not a relationship. It's not like a formula, because it's the same internal person who then has to mediate all of it. So I said to Ilana, can I have your permission to make the epilogue? Because I'm trying to get ahead of the next generation of scholars who are going to call me stupid. They're going to write it. I said, Ilana, the next book is yours. It has to be written by a Jew of color to reframe all of the assumptions that I made in this relationship, which was based on culture. A student question? Oh, please, yeah.
Let's wait for
Thank you. It's a great question. It's majority minority, and I am a professional, so I'll keep part of this confidential. I will just say that there is a recent movement in the last 5 years of me getting emails and phone calls from rabbis and Jewish community executives saying, "You need to come to my group and tell them they're white, because they're not listening to me, and they'll listen to you, I hope." So I now have developed a little thing that I do, and it's generational. The younger generations are white, understanding the race of the older generations, like the grandparents' generation, to be further reductionists, they don't get it, and to their credit, they actually lived through eras of anti-Semitism where they actually were marginalized, and they did not suffer. That said, what I'm sensing is, even from those, at least in leadership that I'm talking to, who don't believe it themselves, understand what you're describing about demographic change and political change. They understand in their children and their grandchildren that the world is very different than it was for them, and they're at least interested in learning and absorbing as much as they can. One quick thing. I was invited to Washington, D.C. for a meeting of 400 rabbis 1 month before the Jewish high holidays. This is a pro-Israel advocacy group, and the job was to deliver to the rabbis all the information on Israel that they would need to write their sermons. And at first I told them, "You don't want me there with what I'm going to say." And then they said, "Oh no, we've heard you speak, that's why we want you." And I gave my talk, it was about American Zionism college. And an older white male rabbi was in the back of the room and was very upset with me, and he said, "My daughter told me I should just check my privilege at the door. What do you think?" And I said, "I think you should check your privilege at the door." I don't think he got it. Right? Then that's it. But I am never saying that there
That's one question. So, first of all, Mark, this is so wonderful to hear you. One of the situations that you said when we talked about political past and trying to understand it, but then we sit on September 13th, 2018, in a world that I would say in my lifetime is more polarized, more stigmatized, we demonize more people than we ever have before, we demean more people than ever before. What do you think you see is happening, whether it's Black-Jewish relations, whether it's Latino Black relations? Where are the places where people are meeting and talking honestly and saying, how do we reclaim a country in a way that celebrates our own identities, our own marginalizations, and refuses to give in to a culture that demeans so many of us?
Twitter.
I take a place that. I believe like there's, I believe the pendulum theory, like the pendulum swings. So, we had this time where it's like, America is really embracing its ideals. We have a Black president. It's like, it was amazing. So I have a daughter, for example, who's 7, and she's only known a Black president. And I, in fact, had never seen a Black president. So it was a huge difference. And however, we're seeing the pendulum swing in another direction, which is really interesting. And what history has shown me around that is that it's the beginning of a shift in consciousness. People have to become more aware, and this is how we become aware. I think when we look at the extremes, I think it's what's moved us to action, to look at things more critically, to be more honest and more thorough, and to get us closer to our humanity, because we really see the suffering of communities that are going on. And I don't hold myself back and say, those people are horrible. I think that I'm part of a system. I help the system to work. So then I think about myself and how I live in respect to all these things that are going on. How can I deepen my conscience? And maybe, you know, and this is gonna sound like the slogan a little bit cheesy, but I mean, it's true. Like, how do I make change in my small environment? I may not be able to make a huge change, but how do I start to initiate conversations in my family and spaces that kind of mimic what's happening socially in ways that maybe we could have those conversations at this time did not happen. So I think we're in a very, very exciting time.
I think identity politics are okay. I think that there's a lot of positive things that come out from talking about your identity, and as a USF professor, I've met students who come from so many backgrounds that there's no sort of generic way to describe the student body here. And that's what makes this project really exciting, especially because in my classes we traffic in stereotypes in order to dismantle them. And it's really fascinating to see this, the historical memory you're talking about, that some of the stereotypes that are so deeply ingrained for me don't exist for some of these students. And I'm, you know, but I think that the biggest challenge, or the biggest hurdle to get over, is acknowledging that people are speaking different languages. So that even this is something that Reggie and I have talked about, even as co-instructors, we're coming to the material that we're teaching in Black-Jewish relations with totally different vocabularies, different personal life experiences, and different sort of missions for what we want students to gain from the material. And the best thing that we can do is address it and address it and address it, and just deal with the fact that we're not always going to be talking the same language. I think the myth of colorblindness, the myth that we can overcome all this, the myth that there's something called American that we can all sort of talk through together, that we all share. That's the myth to dismantle, I think. Hopefully, I mean, whatever. We're not saving anybody here, but in these kinds of conversations, and I guess that's my hope.
I'll push my guest status and embrace my tenure. And I'll start with Arthur Schlesinger Jr., an historian who wrote a book called The Cycles of American History, and he argued that about every 20 years, the pendulum, as we said, tends to swing back and forth, so that's kind of one theory of what's happening. My career thesis about American Jewish history is that American Jews tend to follow the dominant political culture, whatever it is. I'm interested in the moments when they don't. I find that fascinating. In my first book, I found white Southern Jews who were not involved in the civil rights movement, and Northern white Jews really were, and everyone thought in the historiography that they were different. And I wrote, no, they were actually the same. Because if you're a white Southern Jew, you're going to behave like a white Southerner, and if you're a Northern Jew, you're going to behave like a Northerner, and therefore they're both following the same political ideology. Translated to the current particular moment, if I may, Donald Trump has support from a segment of the American Jewish community. Very strong support from a very small segment, but a well-defined political one. To put the point on it, Donald Trump has Jewish grandchildren. So if the narrative is going to be Jews are anti-Trump because all Jews have to be anti-Trump, and the Passover Seder in the White House is, for the first time in American Jewish history, the family Seder, because the grandkids are probably not using the Yiddish word Zaidi for grandpa, you know, that many Jewish kids do. He's probably not a Zaidi, but just to say, wow, that kind of challenges whatever the assumptions are. And here we have a reflection of some Jews replicating the dominant political culture and willing to do it. Now, other Jews, by the way, are very, very upset about that and arguing that it's an un-Jewish thing to do. What I'm seeing as a scholar and an observer of this is the same thing I saw in the 1950s with Southern Jews and then Northern Jews opposing them. And then my question is, well, what's the Jewish part here? And what's the part of following the dominant culture? And then the question of causality and agency, what's going to cause that pendulum to swing back, which might be of interest to some people in the room. I'm of the personal opinion, and it's not scholarly now because I'm moving into my activist phrase. Perhaps the greatest gift Hillary Clinton gave in her political career was everybody's upset today, and all of the action and the mobilization and the thinking on the questions of humanity and a rights-based approach to democracy. And we'll find out in weeks, right, how that goes. But that would be a way in which it's going to swing back, and then the lesson for the future is coming back as it is. So.
Don't wait at
And on that optimistic note.